Picture a person in a small ancient settlement, sitting slightly apart from the group, completely absorbed in something the others have stopped noticing, the exact way a particular reed bends, or how one section of riverbank never floods the way the rest does. Nobody asked them to study this. They're doing it because the pattern is there, and understanding it feels necessary. Today, that kind of intense, narrow focus often gets labeled a problem. But rewind far enough, and that same mind might have been one of the reasons the settlement worked at all. So here's the real question. What if certain traits we now describe as disorders weren't a flaw evolution somehow failed to remove, but a working part of how early human communities actually built and sustained themselves? To answer that, we have to look honestly at what building a village actually required. It wasn't just cooperation and shared labor. It demanded deep, specific, reliable knowledge. Which plants were safe to eat, how to store grain without it rotting, which materials held together under weather, how to repeat a successful method exactly, season after season, without the process slowly drifting into failure. This kind of knowledge doesn't come from casually knowing a little about everything. It comes from someone going deep into one domain and staying there, often for years. This is where a mind wired for intense, focused, specific interest becomes genuinely valuable. In a modern classroom, that same trait might look disruptive, a child who won't stop talking about one subject. But in an early settlement, that person becomes the one who understands the soil, or the weather patterns, or the exact technique for building a stable wall, better than anyone else in the group. Villages weren't built by generalists alone. They were built by people willing to master narrow, specific problems until the solution actually worked. Attention to detail mattered just as much. Building anything permanent, a shelter, a storage pit, an irrigation channel, required noticing small deviations before they became structural failures. A slightly uneven foundation. A subtle change in soil drainage. A pattern in when a nearby stream tended to rise. The kind of mind that automatically catches these small inconsistencies, rather than smoothing over them, isn't just useful in this context, it's often essential. There's also the matter of consistency and routine. Early settlements depended heavily on procedures being repeated correctly, generation after generation, with no written instructions to fall back on. The exact sequence for preserving food safely. The precise method for firing pottery so it didn't crack. The correct steps for reinforcing a structure before the rainy season. A mind that values doing something exactly the same way every time, that resists shortcuts and drift, is a mind well suited to protecting knowledge that couldn't afford to degrade. And then there's honesty and directness, traits often framed today as a social shortcoming. In a small interdependent community where trust between neighbors directly affected survival, a person who reliably said exactly what they observed, without social maneuvering or exaggeration, may have been someone the group specifically relied on. Not despite their bluntness, but because of it. Researchers studying what's sometimes called complementary cognition have proposed something similar. The idea that early human groups didn't thrive because everyone thought the same way, but because different cognitive styles covered different needs at once. Some individuals were naturally suited to managing relationships and resolving group tension. Others were suited to focused, detailed, systematic work that kept the physical infrastructure of a settlement functioning. Neither role replaced the other. A group made entirely of one or the other would likely have struggled. Now, it's important to be careful here, because it would be easy, and wrong, to turn this into a simple story where autism is just a hidden superpower. That framing does a disservice to a lot of people. The traits we're discussing exist across a wide spectrum, and for many people, the challenges that come with them are real, daily, and significant. Sensory overwhelm, communication barriers, and genuine difficulty navigating environments that weren't built with them in mind. None of that is erased by pointing out that some of these same traits may have had real value in early communities. And we shouldn't romanticize the ancient world either. Life then was often harsh, and there's no clear evidence that every early group treated difference with warmth or understanding. What this evidence does suggest, carefully and specifically, is something narrower, that certain traits now framed primarily as deficits weren't inherently useless throughout human history. In the right context, small, consistent communities that depended on deep specific knowledge and precise repeated methods, these traits appear to have filled real, necessary roles. What seems to have changed isn't the traits themselves. It's the environment. Early settlements rewarded focus, precision, and consistency. Much of the modern world runs on something very different: constant social performance, rapid task switching, and environments that weren't designed with this kind of mind in mind at all. So did autistic traits help our ancestors build villages? The honest answer, based on how early communities actually functioned, is that they very plausibly did, not as an exception to how humans usually worked, but as one thread in a much wider, necessary mix of different kinds of minds, each covering what the others couldn't.